The St. Louis Cardinals are not in the healthiest of positions right now. They've gone two straight seasons featuring them miss the playoffs, with things only looking more bleak for 2025. Their window of winning with arguably the best corner infield in baseball failed miserably, and they're now in that process of rebuilding, or at the very least retooling in some sort of way, a reset. They're not in a very good division. In fact, it may very well be the worst in baseball, at least right now it looks that way. But the Cardinals just don't seem well off going for it right now, even being in such a weak division. And it sucks. It really does, at least for the fans, for the historic franchise that it is, one that expects to win. This is not something the fans are used to going through. But there's a lot that led the Cardinals to the spot they're in. Years and years of poor decisions, poor developing. And when thinking about how the Cardinals got here, it makes me think about how much they've turned into an extreme opposite of the franchise they used to be. I mean, the Cardinals used to be a team nobody wanted to play, especially when it mattered. They had this extra edge to them, what many deemed devil magic, contributing to some of the things they were able to pull off. So, in talking about how and why the Cardinals have fallen off so much over the years, I wanted to take a throwback sort of angle and approach to it, to remember how this team used to be and how much they've gradually and slowly turned into the opposite. Really quick, as always, if you're part of the 56% of viewers not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button if you enjoy the videos, as it all started in 2011. What started out as mostly a season where the Cardinals looked to have another playoffless year, what would be their second straight. By the later half of August, the Cardinals were 10 games behind the Brewers for first place in the division, but even worse, 10 and a half games behind the Atlanta Braves in the wildcard standings. Nowadays, there are 3 wildcard teams in each league for the playoffs. Before that, there were just 2, but 2011 was before even that was a thing. And it was what ended up being the last year where there was just 1 wildcard team, 3 division winners, and 1 wildcard team for each league. So the postseason was insanely limited, which adds to how down bad St. Louis was, being that far back of the Braves. They had just been swept by the Dodgers, which today doesn't seem crazy, but the 2011 Dodgers were not good. And after getting swept, the Cardinals had a 1.3% chance of making the postseason. It was bad, so bad to the point where the Cardinals contemplated and even discussed trading Lance Berkman, their best hitter that season, to the Texas Rangers. It never ended up happening, but whatever. It's not like Berkman would go on to play a part in preventing the Rangers, who were really good that year, from winning the World Series or anything like that. They were going to be fine. As for the Cardinals, they were still in the bad spot once the calendar hit September, but they did gain some momentum, not only just winning 3 out of 4 in a series against the Pirates, but sweeping those first place Brewers. So that's 6 out of 7 in August. That brought their playoff chances up to a whopping 4.3%. So yeah, there was still a ways to go if they were serious about an actual run at this thing. And it quickly became clear if they were going to make a run, it wouldn't be via winning the division. The Brewers ended up locking that down and clinching with still a week left of the season, while the Cardinals looked on from the outside. But the Braves weren't following the Brewers' method of locking in their spot. They still had a big lead, but one that continued to shrink and shrink. But it was such a big lead that even when the Cardinals swept them in a series toward the middle of September, they were still 4.5 games back, which is a lot better than 10.5, but their percentage was just over 7% now to make the postseason. But here's where that devil magic kicked in. The Cardinals just kept winning, including teams at least perceived to be much better than them, like the 102-win Phillies, but it's also the way they were winning these games. I mentioned them sweeping the Braves, and that series featured the Cardinals tying the game with 2 outs in the 9th inning, later walking off. They won the second game by the same score, leaving the tying run at third base, and against the Pirates and Phillies, there were some really tight games they held on to win. The Cardinals weren't dominating by any means, but they were winning enough games to hang in it, while the Braves gradually got worse and worse. But the Cardinals were just hanging on by a thread themselves. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There was a game against the Mets where the Cardinals were up 6-2 in the 9th inning, 3 outs away from a sweep, only for Rafael Furcal to let a ball roll through his legs in the top of the 9th, leading to a 6-run Mets rally which won them the game 8-6. Furcal felt so angry by what had happened that he was talking about retiring until a personal meeting with Tony La Russa changed his mind. But things were coming down to the wire here, and this had the makings to either end in big disappointment or some serious glory. And with 6 games left of the entire season, the Cardinals still trailed the Braves by 2 games with a higher percentage to make the postseason now, but still low at just over 24%. And the two teams didn't have scheduled games left against each other, so the Cardinals had to win and rely on the Braves to keep falling off. And through half of those half dozen games left, they made progress. The Cards went on to actually lose the first game against the Cubs, while the Braves won their first game against the Nationals. So they're now 3 games back with 5 to go. All the Braves have to do is just not F this up tremendously. A playoff spot was in the palm of their hands. The Cardinals clutched up and walked off the Cubs in Game 2 after being down in the bottom of the ninth before winning yet another one-run game in Game 3 to win 2 of 3 against the Cubs, while the Braves lost both of their last 2 in DC. So the Cardinals' best case scenario happened after the worst case scenario happened to begin things. 1 game back with 3 to go. The Cardinals' last 3 would come against the Astros in Houston, and similar to the Dodgers, it's not like today. 2011 was not at all a good version of the team. While the Braves were ending their season against the Phillies, the National League's best team, and the best team in all baseball. And just like the Cardinals lost their first game against the Cubs, they'd lose their first game against Houston, getting walked off on in 10 innings, while the Braves also lost their game. So still 1 game back with 2 to go now. And after going down 5-0 early in Houston in Game 2, the Cardinals bats woke the hell up and scored 13 runs in the last 6 innings to win, while the Braves got whooped 7-1. So they had finally done it. The Cardinals had come all the way back to catch the Braves, but the job was still far from over. If the two teams both won or lost to end the season, they would have to play a game 163 tiebreaker, but if one loses and one wins, the winner gets the wildcard spot. The Cardinals were all of a sudden in the driver's seat though, because they could not have had any less of an issue in their game, winning 8-0 in the final day of the year and guaranteeing at least another game to play. But if the Braves lost, their collapse would be complete and the Cardinals would take their spot. So now the Braves, just days removed from having a 3-game lead with 5 to go, are now fighting just to force an extra game 163. Their game started after the Cardinals game ended, so the Cardinals could just relax and watch the chaos ensue. And the chaos ensued. The Braves-Phillies ended up being a classic. The Braves were up 3-1 late and took a 3-2 lead into the 9th inning, so they're 3 outs away from forcing that tiebreaker game. In comes Rookie of the Year, the best reliever in baseball, Craig Kimbrell, to close this thing out, only to blow it, with the Phillies tying the game, one that would go deep into the night. 4 innings later now, in the 13th, and the game is still tied at 3, the Phillies would take the lead, and with the tying run at first with 1 out, Freddie Freeman would ground into a double play, and it was finally done. The Braves' once 10.5-game lead was completely erased. They were now out, while the Cardinals miraculously punched their ticket to the postseason. It was incredible. After edging the Braves to win the wild card,
What did you just say, Bill?
it was the largest comeback in history after 130 games, as the Cardinals went 23-9 over their final 32 games to erase that 10.5-game deficit, including going 18-8 in the month of September, while the Braves went 9-18 for September. Incredible.
From a certain point of view.
Well, yes, also devastating if you are a Braves fan. And you know how in history they tell us to remember even the bad so it doesn't repeat itself? Well, the Braves have since made sure fans will always remember their collapse by redoing it at every one of their home games in the form of a race, having a fan get a halfway start while the man deemed Mr. Freeze runs to catch and eventually beat them. Pretty clever way to make sure fans and players remember to never get complacent. But what's crazy is that as wild as this was for the Cardinals to do, this late season comeback to snatch a postseason spot, the Devil Magic Cardinals fun was only beginning. Like, we hadn't seen anything yet. The Cardinals were now in the postseason, but they were going to now face the very team that helped play a part in them getting there, the Phillies, the team with the most wins, and not just in the National League, but in all of baseball. And they showed why they were so good in Game 1, putting up 11 runs and taking a 1-0 series lead. And by the 3rd inning of Game 2, it was looking like the cute little run for the Cardinals would be just that, cute, but no match in the end for a team like the Phillies. They jumped out ahead 4-0 early. Cliff Lee was on the mound for Philly, a man who finished top 3 in Cy Young votes that year, while also getting some MVP votes. So you're already up 1-0 in the series, are up 4-0 in Game 2. One of the best pitchers in baseball is on the mound for you. You're home in front of a ton of rowdy Philadelphians.
Nothing can stop us now.
Maybe on paper, this Phillies team was better, and the Cards had talent too, but they also had the one thing that was unmatched: Devil Magic. The Cards went on to score 5 unanswered runs and win the game 5-4, a massive win that sent the series back to St. Louis tied. But this wasn't the end of the Phillies. They still had the upper hand, winning Game 3 and being just a win away from moving on. Game 3 introduced us to the rally squirrel who was in the outfield causing a delay. The Phillies, of course, won the game, so at that time it didn't seem to matter. But little did we all know that damn squirrel was being sent to spread some of that devil magic, because he reappeared in Game 4, this time running across home plate as Roy Oswalt was throwing a pitch to Skip Schumacher before jumping into the stands. Angel Hernandez, because of course he was the umpire in this sort of a moment, called the pitch a ball. Oswalt argued the pitch shouldn't count because he had been distracted by the squirrel. That argument didn't go anywhere, but it was at this moment the squirrel's games were starting to work. It's actually not even proven if it was the same squirrel in both games 3 and 4, but many believe it was. Seems like a story you'd hear about from the early 1900s before video, but this was real. The squirrel, or squirrels, plural, were making an impact and clearly getting under the Phillies' skins. The Cardinals won Game 4 after being down 2-0 in the first inning. After the game, the Phillies manager Charlie Manuel said that if he had a firearm, he would have shot the rodent. Things were getting real, with the series now headed back to Philly for a winner-take-all Game 5. But to make things even more dramatic, before Game 5, despite the series not even being in St. Louis anymore, the squirrel somehow made his way to Philly, even confronting Oswalt in the outfield before the game. Phillies fans then taunted the Cardinals by throwing a stuffed animal squirrel into their bullpen, which is the absolute dumbest thing they could have done. Like, did they not realize that was only giving St. Louis more powers that led to Chris Carpenter to throw a complete game shutout to lead the Cardinals to a shocking NLDS win over the Phillies? In the final out, Ryan Howard hitting a harmless ground ball to second base and tearing his Achilles in the process. The series was lost and your best player was now seriously hurt. Things could not have ended any worse for the Phillies, while the Cardinals and the squirrel were moving on. Next up, the team who beat them out for the division, Milwaukee, who just like the Phillies won Game 1. But at this point, maybe they should have just lost the first game on purpose to switch things up, because the Cardinals had them right where they wanted them, winning Games 2 and 3, then now back at home, before repeating that pattern, losing Game 4 before winning the next 2 to win the series, and the offense did not hold back in Game 6, putting up 9 runs in the first 3 innings, and the Brewers put up some fight, but it just wasn't enough at that point as the Cardinals doubled their runs to win. David Freese won NLCS MVP, an unlikely candidate considering he was a good player for the Cardinals all year, but far from their biggest star. Didn't matter because he went off, hitting .545 with 3 home runs and 9 RBIs. So they move on to the World Series, where they would now have home field advantage because of the old rules, where the winner of the All-Star game determined home field for the World Series. So despite winning 6 less games than Texas that year, they got a home field, also switching things up a bit by winning Game 1. The Rangers, on the verge of going down 2-0 in the series, staged a 9th inning comeback to tie it, only for Albert Pujols to go God mode in Game 3 now in Texas, going 5 for 6 with 3 home runs and a 16-7 win. The Rangers went on to win both Games 4 and 5, though, with their pitching completely changing how they were in Game 3, holding the Cardinals to just 2 runs in those 2 games. So now back to St. Louis, where all of a sudden the Cardinals were now in serious trouble, especially considering the Rangers broke a 4-4 tie with 3 runs in the 7th inning. And going into the 9th inning, even with the Cardinals scoring in the 8th, the Rangers were still up with just 3 outs away from their first ever championship. First hitter, strikeout, 2 outs away. An Albert Pujols double and Lance Berkman walk would start a rally, but after Alan Craig looked at strike 3 go by, the Cardinals were just 1 out away from having their magical year end. If there was any devil magic or squirrel power left, the time was now. And with 2 strikes on David Freese, the Cardinals are holding on to a thread with just a single finger. That's all they have left. And that's when it happened. The Cardinals brought their unbeatable devil magic out. They had some left. And what is arguably the most clutch hit in MLB history, Freese would send a 98-mile-an-hour fastball over the head of Nelson Cruz in right field to score 2 runs, tying the game as he'd end up on third. And if things couldn't get any crazier, the Rangers would immediately put 2 runs back up on the board with a 2-run homer by Josh Hamilton. The Cardinals were now in the same exact spot from an inning earlier. Well, time to go to work. 2 singles and a bunt would put the tying run at second with 1 out. A ground out would bring home the runner from third to make it just a 1-run game, but also get the Rangers just 1 more out away from a championship again. Albert Pujols gets intentionally walked, and up comes Lance Berkman. Remember, the same guy who the team thought about trading away to the very team they were now facing in the World Series. He's now their final hope against that team. The count gets to 2 strikes, and yet again the Cardinals are a strike away from being done. They couldn't do it again, could they? Oh, you bet your sweet ass. Berkman would loft a single into center, scoring John Jay easily from second. Tie game, it's 9-9, and after the Rangers did nothing in the 11th, up comes the first hero of the game, David Freese, to end it this time, smacking a leadoff home run in center field to force Game 7. Unreal. And they even trailed in Game 7, not as dramatically as they did in Game 6, going down immediately 2-0 before immediately tying it and taking it from there, winning 6-2 and shocking everyone to win the World Series. The odds they had to overcome, the insane late season comeback that took everything going right, the clutch wins they had to get in the process while relying on the Braves to collapse, beating the Phillies the way they did, taking down the division-winning rival Brewers, and then the ridiculous Game 6, just one of the more improbable teams of all time. But there was still magic to be spread around unfortunate opponents. The Cardinals once again were not close to winning the division in 2012, won a couple less games than the year before, and no longer had Albert Pujols after he signed his big contract with the Angels, finishing 9 games back of the Reds and actually only making the playoffs because of the new format, where there would now be 2 wildcard teams to play a winner-take-all game. Ironically, if the old format was in effect, the Braves would have easily got the wildcard spot this time, unlike when they blew it the year before, but thanks to the new rules, there was no escaping the Cardinals, who they now had to face in the wildcard game despite finishing 6 games ahead of them in the standings. And what happened? The Cardinals would win said game in Atlanta that involved the controversial infield fly call by the umpires that helped stop a potential rally from the Braves late. It got so heated, the fans were hurling stuff onto the field, and it continued to be so heated that even when the Cardinals got the final out to win, instead of celebrating on the field, they all sprinted toward the clubhouse. Atlanta once again got effed over by the Cardinals. They just couldn't escape them. Up next was the 98-win Washington Nationals, and the Cardinals looked to have full control of the 2-1 series lead until Jason Worth hit a walk-off home run to send things to a Game 5 where the Nationals would come out swinging, jumping out 6-0 by the 3rd inning. The Cardinals looked done. But after slowly chipping away and getting a little closer, they were still down late, but it was now just a 1-run game. The Nats added a massive insurance run in the 8th inning and were now just 3 outs away from their first ever playoff series win in franchise history. Carlos Beltran kicked things off with a double, but after Matt Holliday grounded out and Alan Craig struck out, the Cardinals were an out away from being done. Cue the devil magic. Down to the team's last strike, Yadier Molina would walk, and up comes David Freese with the same position he was in a year earlier in the World Series. And although he didn't quite bring the same result and tie the game, he kept things going, working the count full like Molina did and taking the walk, with the team down to their final strike. First pitch to the next hitter, Daniel Descalso, a shot up the middle off the glove of Ian Desmond at shortstop, shooting into center field where 2 runs would score, tie game, and you could hear crickets. Next hitter, Pete Kozma, shoots one in a right, 2 more score, and you could hear a toothpick hitting the ground. 3 outs later, the Cardinals move on and stun everyone yet again. Just incredible. And at this point, you're thinking, okay, nobody can beat this team, right? Like, there's no way they can be beat with all these ridiculous comebacks. They just have the luck on their side. But you could also look at it from the standpoint of, well, this devil magic, as powerful as it is, has to run out at some point. It just has to, and it did. The early 2010s Giants' power of friendship ended up being the biggest challenge for the Cardinals, because despite actually dominating the series at first and going up 3-1 in 2012, just a game away from going back to the World Series, the Giants opened a can of whoop ass and won 3 straight, holding the Cardinals to just a single run through those last 3 games, capping things off with a 9-0 Game 7 win. And they also beat the Cardinals in 2014, this time in 5 games. In 2013, the Red Sox were the ones to take them out, mainly David Ortiz. He's 80% of the reason the Red Sox won that series. It was pretty incredible. He almost single-handedly took out the Devil Magic Cardinals himself. But in terms of the Cardinals' success in the playoffs, they took out the Pirates in the first round after having their backs against the wall and smoked the Dodgers in the NLCS and NLDS of 2014. Looking back, the Cardinals single-handedly may be the reason so many people look at Kershaw as a playoff choker. Has he had his bad postseason moments? Yes, of course, but a lot of those bad memories are attributed to St. Louis. They tagged Kershaw for 7 runs on 10 hits in the final game of the 2013 NLCS, rocked him for 8 more runs in Game 1 of the 2014 NLDS, and even when he dominated for the most part of Game 4 in that same series, they got the last laugh anyway, with Matt Adams' 3-run home run in the 7th inning to eventually beat Kershaw and the Dodgers. But like I said, the Giants proved to be the kryptonite. And since 2012, you can notice the Cardinals have been able to sporadically have their moments, but not at all in the bunches they were able to have them in 2011 and 2012. In 2015, they lost to the Cubs in the first round, missed the playoffs for 3 straight seasons before trading for Paul Goldschmidt and winning the division in 2019. And this is where the newest window of winning began for St. Louis, even showing off some of that magic again by taking down the Braves again. The Braves just couldn't get an upper hand even all these years later, with the decisive Game 5 ending so anticlimactically and brutally. After such a hard-fought series, now back in Atlanta for Game 5, with the crowd ready going nuts, the Cardinals started the game with not 1, not 2, not 3, but 10 runs. 10. I mean, holy shit, absolute boner killer. It's one thing to be down 2 runs, 3 runs, maybe even 5 runs early. How about 10? The Cardinals won 13-1, but this is where things differed from 2011 because kind of like 2012, they were able to do the unthinkable, like something crazy like that in Atlanta to beat the Braves, but had nothing left after that, getting dusted and clean swept by the eventual World Series winning Washington Nationals, accomplishing what the Braves couldn't and getting the revenge against the Cardinals for what they did to them all those years back. And since 2019, the Cardinals have had some promising teams and runs, but a combination of just not quite having enough and poor decision making from a roster standpoint and development standpoint has led this franchise to where they are now. In 2020, they won the first playoff game they played against the Padres. They've yet to win a single playoff game since. The Padres took the next 2, and after a crazy run to make the playoffs in 2021 that included a 17-game winning streak in September with Nolan Arenado now on the team, they didn't quite have the same magic from 10 years earlier, with the Dodgers now being the NL West team to take them out after the Giants did twice in the Padres the year before. It was a close game all the way, the wildcard game, until Chris Taylor said goodnight. One powerful swing of the bat ending all the Cardinals' hopes and dreams. They fired their manager Mike Shildt, a decision that to this day doesn't really add up, but the Cardinals would have a better 2022 season, winning the division, and it really did feel special. I mean, like I said, they did win 17 in a row in 2021 in the final month. That was crazy, but in 2022 they took things a step further. Paul Goldschmidt won the MVP award at first base. Nolan Arenado was on the other corner of the infield being awesome. Yadier Molina was having his final season, so there was some magic to that. And the Cardinals also brought back 57-year-old Albert Pujols for one last ride. And instead of him just being a cute little story by just being around the team, he went on to legitimately have a better season than he had in all his 9 years as an Angel. It's very funny looking back that that's actually what happened. There's not one season he had with all 9 years with the Angels that was better when he finally went back to the Cardinals. The Angels, man. Oof. Anyway, Pujols went on a crazy run, hitting 18 home runs in the second half to join the 700 home run club. Like, it was literally a Disney movie being played out in front of our eyes. A deep postseason run was expected until you realize the Cardinals must have sold their soul to win it all, and win it all in the way that they did in 2011. Because in poetic fashion, they were the ones to have their season come crashing down with multiple heartbreaking losses.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
The first one being a 6-run 9th-inning rally by the Phillies to take the first game in St. Louis before winning the series the following night as the tying run was left on base. And since then, the Cardinals have fallen off hard, not even getting the chance to get to the playoffs to lose, dropping all the way down to last place in the NL Central the next year in 2023, and they did jump back up to second place in 2024, but they weren't close to being a playoff team, even being in second place. It's just because their division was awful. Paul Goldschmidt has since fallen off and joined the Yankees to try and salvage anything left at the end of his career. Nolan Arenado is inevitably getting traded. They have a bottom-tier farm system, and this is all happening while the Brewers continue to find ways to field good teams. They built what looks to be a good, sustainable system of winning, even if they don't really spend much money. The Reds look to be turning a corner, and I'm not saying the Cardinals are doomed forever, but they definitely don't look to be in a serious spot to contend. And it also doesn't help that they don't have the best track record of making the smartest decisions, notably with trades. Randy Arozarena was originally in the Cardinals organization before getting traded to the Rays, and the rest is history with him. He was awesome with the Rays for years, and now he's with Seattle. And it's a trade that's aged so poorly, even the team's general manager, John Mozeliak, has publicly outright said it was a mistake. They traded away Arozarena's Cardinals minor league roommate, Adolis Garcia, only for him to also be great and eventually play a big part in the Rangers winning a championship. They also traded away 2 of the best pitchers in baseball at once, Sandy Alcantara and Zach Gallen, for 1 year of Marcell Ozuna before he left for Atlanta, while Alcantara went on to win a Cy Young Award, and Gallen's been awesome for Arizona, where he was eventually dealt to after going to Miami. It also isn't ideal that this franchise can't seem to develop their own players that they do decide to keep. They had the number 1 ranked prospect in all of baseball in 2023, Jordan Walker, the number 1 prospect, and he has not at all shown that potential, although he's still so super young, so you can't give up on him yet. That would be really stupid, but there's definitely something to all these players getting traded away and then going off. Another trade they made was Tyler O'Neill, sending him off to Boston, and had the best season he's had in a while after struggling for a couple of years leading up to the trade. And the Red Sox only ended up having Tyler O'Neill for 1 year, And was he the missing piece as to why the Cardinals missed the playoffs last year? If they didn't trade him, would they have made it? No. I think it's more about the overall trend that the Cardinals do not seem to work with their own players, specifically hitters, that well. And they go off to other teams and do so much better when working with other organizations. And it's weird because the Cardinals used to seem like an organization that was able to find talent and just put things together really nicely. I mean, they've had stars, but even if it wasn't in the sexiest of ways, I mean, you saw those rallies they were putting together in those playoff runs. They weren't necessarily the biggest stars on the team getting the biggest hits, but all these years later, after all, the devil magic has seemed to run out. The Cardinals just seem like a very different organization now, and it's all the more reason why they're now heading into this reset, even adding on the former Red Sox president of baseball operations, Chaim Bloom, to come in and do his thing to help build the Cardinals back up with young talent with the goal of building a sustained formula of winning. Chaim Bloom didn't find that much success in Boston, at least not in the field, but he did build what is now arguably the best farm system in baseball. That's mostly attributed to what he did, even though he's not there anymore. So the Cardinals are not in a great spot right now. After all those years of getting away with crazy comebacks, finding the most insane, outlandish, improbable ways to win, and then relying on veterans like Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Yadier Molina, the magic of 65-year-old Albert Pujols to help push them to the promised land in the last few years, they realize it's now time to go a much different route, go a lot younger, and try and build a lot more sustainable of a team. And hey, maybe they'll get back to those years of devil magic, but as of right now, it looks like this is the beginning of a new era in St. Louis. One that doesn't look to begin with much winning, but if they can start turning this organization around quick with the way they do things from within, maybe the winning will come a little sooner than we think. There's of course a lot that needs to go right before we see anything like those prime Cardinals, but hey, maybe when they do get back on track, their devil magic will be back all fueled up and ready. But for now, it's been long run out. Let me know your thoughts and thank you for watching.